Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome into Thursday's episode of The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button below if you're not subscribed to Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page. Also, be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. I am here every Tuesday and Thursday evening on The Process on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page to break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news. On yesterday, National Signing Day, the Crimson Tide picked up two huge signatures from five-star prospects in Kamar Wheaton and Terrion Arnold. And with the Crimson Tide 2021 recruiting class closing with a historically good class, although it may not be done, it is time for the Crimson Tide's coaching staff to turn a lot of their attention, even more attention than they have in the past, to the 2022 recruiting class. And with that in mind, on today's episode, I want to discuss some needs for the Crimson Tide in the 2022 recruiting class in its early stages. I will discuss that in the next segment because we are going to roll right into that discussion with National Signing Day being yesterday. The biggest news was Crimson Tide picking up two huge signatures on Wheaton and Arnold. So with that being said, let's get the process started. Today, I'm going to talk about some positions that I feel will be a priority for the Crimson Tide in the 2022 recruiting class. And when I say a priority, I am talking about some positions what the Crimson Tide will pay a little bit more attention to here in this 2022 recruiting cycle compared to what they did in the 2021 recruiting cycle. And when you look at the Crimson Tide's current roster, it is pretty balanced at the moment. They have a good balance of young players and veteran guys. And I think as a result, the Crimson Tide will have a pretty balanced 2022 recruiting class. I expect this to be one of the more balanced classes that Nick Saban has ever signed. But the first position I want to talk about when it comes to priority positions is the kicker position. I think this is a good class for the Crimson Tide to add another highly ranked kicker after signing Will Reichert in the 2019 recruiting cycle. And with Reichert heading into his junior season, you sign a guy in this 2022 recruiting class. He will come in when Will Reichert is heading into his senior year, so he will not have to wait on him to come in to make an immediate start like Will Reichert has had. He will also have a season to work behind Will Reichert, who will have some big shoes to fill in Tuscaloosa. I believe he will leave his mark in Tuscaloosa and on the Alabama fan base, and I think those are going to be some big shoes. So you get a guy in, get him to work under Will Reichert for a year that he should be ready to go once his sophomore year comes around. And when you look at what Will Reichert has done in Tuscaloosa, I am pretty sure Tide fans want to make sure a reliable kicker is in Tuscaloosa at all times. So I think a reliable kicker here in this 2022 recruiting class could be huge for the Tide on the recruiting trail. The next position I want to turn my attention to is the defensive end position, an inline defensive end position. I think the Crimson Tide could really benefit from adding some defensive ends to this 2022 recruiting class. And they have already begun working on that by adding a verbal commitment from Walter Bob Jr. recently. I think he is a kid that possibly could fit into that position group. When we look at the Crimson Tide's roster, they are expected to lose guys like LeBron Ray and Fedarian Mathis at the end of this upcoming season, but they also could lose a couple of guys who could possibly have a big season like Byron Young, for example. And with that in mind, you're going to want to make sure you have some depth at that defensive end position. So I think that is another position that the Crimson Tide could really benefit from adding a couple of guys. In the 2021 recruiting class, Tide signed guys like Monkel Goodwine and Anquin Barnes, guys who are expected to play at the defensive end position. But I think when you look at the 2022 recruiting class, we may see the Crimson Tide pick up on that particular position group. So we may see more inline defensive ends in this 2022 recruiting cycle. The third position and the last position that I am going to talk about today is the running back position. I know Crimson Tide is loaded at running back now. They are expected to have 7 scholarship running backs once Kamar Wheaton enrolls at the University of Alabama in the summer. But when you look at that loaded running back room. You are most likely going to lose Brian Robinson Jr. at the end of this upcoming season, but you can also lose a guy like Keelan Robinson or possibly Trey Sanders if they have a breakout year, a Heisman Trophy year, and they can move on to the NFL draft. They have a good draft grade, and when you look at the Crimson Tide's running back room, if those guys were to depart, you're looking at 5 running backs now. And if you look around again, and if the transfer portal happens to hit that running back room, you could be looking at a situation where the Crimson Tide now has 4 running backs. Things can quickly change when it comes to transfer portal and guys having successful years and moving on to the NFL after having a good draft grade. So I think the Crimson Tide's coaching staff is going to take a good look at the running back position. I know for a fact they want to add at least 1 guy, but they could possibly add 2 guys to this class or more to make sure that they keep that depth at that running back position. I think that is going to help the Crimson Tide a lot if they can land 2 running backs in this 2022 recruiting class. That will do it for this episode of The Process. Be sure to hit that subscribe button before you leave. Also, be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles, get your hands on our yearly print magazine issue. Also, get an opportunity to read our in-depth scouting reports on each Tide commit and each recruiting class. Then head to the Google Play Store if you have an Android device, or to the Apple App Store if you have an Apple device, and download the Touchdown Alabama app. With that app, breaking news notifications can be sent to your mobile device. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine.